On the last Sunday before school began, Isabel laid everything she owned on the floor of a 2-room apartment that swallowed echoes and smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. The fan whirred above her like a patient, bored bird. Tomas, 11, sat with a pencil behind his ear and a seriousness that didn't belong to a boy who still liked building forts from blankets. Leah, 7, traced circles on the parquet with her toe, the hem of her t-shirt caught between her teeth. They were counting the cost of a promise. The apartment in Matosinhos was small, the front window giving the Atlantic air permission to wander in whenever the wind remembered them. Rent had just risen to $780 a month. The cafe where Isabel worked paid $7.10 an hour, and if she picked up cleaning shifts at the tourist flats on weekends, she could sometimes bring home $980, $150 after deductions in a good month. Not enough for mistakes, not enough for emergencies. Barely enough for school shoes and the little music notebook Leah wanted with the treble clef on the cover. On the floor lay what remained after she had sold the car, the second-hand guitar, the wedding china that had survived every move except the last. A jeweler on Rua de Tirofeita had weighed her wedding ring and handed her $620 in quiet, apologetic notes, as if he, too, understood that the gold had once been a story. She pretended not to feel the weight lift from her finger, as a loss, and told herself it was a transformation. Metal into months of school lunches, into bus passes, into textbooks with wide margins for tomorrows. "Do we have enough?" Thomas asked. He didn't look at the money. He looked at her. "We have enough for the first term," she said. She had the emails, the registrations, the $400 enrollment fee for each child to attend the cooperative school in Foz that offered small classes and a scholarship possibility later if they kept their grades high. There would be $350 monthly tuition per child until the scholarship board met in November. After that, she paused, the word after folding itself into a tight, private shape. After that, they would see. Leah brought her their jar of coins, the jar once labeled Beach Days, now relabeled Bus and Bread, in Isabel's neat hand. She shook it, listening to the metal rain. "We can sell my roller skates," Leah said, brave and too bright. "I can run. I like running. See?" She sprinted to the kitchenette and back, her hair lifting like a flag. Isabel smiled and caught her. "Your skates stay," she said. "They are not for sale. They are for being 7. When the landlord, Senor Azevedo, had delivered the letter about the rent increase, he'd said in that awkward, shrugging way, "You know how it is. Prices. Maintenance. We've had wear and tear." He'd glanced at the children then, as if they were a kind of weather he didn't know how to mention. Not cruel, just practical. A man counting his own numbers in a private ledger. Still, the sentence nested in Isabel's chest like a splinter. You've had wear and tear, as if their life were something that frayed on contact. She told herself not to keep the splinter. She had no room for souvenirs of hurt. In the corner, a stack of forms waited. School medical declarations, bus pass applications, cafeteria allergy lists, a bank paper she never entirely understood. Next to them, a recipe notebook where she'd planned Sunday batch cooking, simple, cheap meals, lentil stew with carrots and bay leaf, rice baked with garlic and frozen peas, a tray of roasted tomatoes tossed with stale bread for panzanella, because stale bread had a second life if you treated it kindly. Isabel was not afraid of work. She was afraid of the cold arithmetic of time. If she left at 6:20 a.m., she could be at the cafe by 7, open the metal shutter with the rusty sigh it made every morning, and start the espresso machine. The morning rush would be a blur of cups and coins and tourists pointing at pastéis de nata, as if pastry were a new language they wanted to learn at once. She'd finish at 2, race the bus to the cooperative school by 3 for Leah's pickup, then circle back for Thomas, who had football practice on Mondays and Wednesdays, if the fees stayed paid. Then home, then homework, then cleaning shifts from 6 to 9 every other evening at the flats near Trindade, the ones with white sheets and little soaps. She could be in bed by 11 if she didn't think too much. She believed in sleep like other people believed in saints. "Can we still do pancakes on Sundays?" Tomas asked, voice casual, eyes not. "Of course," she said. "Pancakes are our religion." She meant it. Ritual was the scaffolding of courage. Pancakes were Friday's leftover milk, and Saturday's last egg made into a circle of yes. "Then we'll be fine," he said, as if he were the one making the world. They packed their bags for the first day, pencils sharpened to hopeful points, notebooks labeled with their names. When the night pressed close, and the seagulls screamed like hungry hinges outside. Isabel lay awake, counting not sheep, but hours. She thought of the choices behind her, and the ones ahead. The marriage that had ended with a soft, devastating sentence. I can't do this anymore. He hadn't been cruel. He had been gone while still in the room, the worst kind of leaving. Child support arrived some months, other months not, always with an apology and a promise and a next time. She did not build budgets on promises. She built them on cash. Isabel turned to the window and watched a ship's lights move silently across the dark. In the morning, everything would begin. She would hand over money that used to be music and rings and plates. She would watch her children walk into a school she chose for its kind teachers, and the way the headmistress had looked at Leah and said, "Every child can bloom here." She would start the month with numbers that made her chest tighten. She would breathe anyway, and somewhere she could not see yet, a locked drawer was waiting. The key had been turning toward her for years without her knowing. What waited on the other side of that lock would change everything, but not the way people think when they hear the word heiress. Not overnight, not without splinters, not without work. For now, the fan, the forms, the jar, the small fierce promise, we will keep learning. And the question that won't leave, how many months of courage can be bought with the coins you have? September opened like a door that stuck, then gave. The first week compressed Isabel into a shape that fit perfectly between bus seats and cafe counters. She learned the angles of it with the same careful efficiency she used to fold sheets at the tourist flats. This was their new city within a city. Bus stop to school gate, to cafe, to cleaning job, to home. The sea was always present, like a promise or a dare, the wind carrying salt into the laundry even when she closed the window. At the cafe on Avenida da Boa Vista, her supervisor, Ana, gave her an extra key and a list that lived under the till. Milk orders, repairman's number, a spreadsheet of who took sugar and who said they didn't, but always did. Anna was brisk but kind in the way of women who have been tired for a long time. "Text me next time. If I can't, I'll find help," she said after Isabel stayed late on the second day to cover a sick coworker. It sounded like a blessing. The cooperative school sat behind a low wall and an olive tree that spilled its narrow shade onto the pavement. At the parent orientation, the headmistress, Dr. Vasconcelos, spoke plainly about scholarships and expectations. "We have funds," she said, "but they are not bottomless. The board meets in November. Keep your children's attendance steady. Keep us informed. We are a community, not a miracle." Isabel appreciated the sentence more than any promise could have pleased her. Not a miracle. Fine. She could work with that. Fees paid. The month began. $700 gone after the first tuition transfer. Another $80 vanished into bus passes and cafeteria credit. Rent would drain the account on the 6th. She shifted numbers across a page the way she shifted plates across a table, trying not to drop anything. "If I take 2 Ubers this week because of late cleaning shifts," she calculated in the margin of a receipt. "Then we switch to beans and rice on Thursday and Friday, and Tomas's football takes a pause 1 week. She would make it a game." Tomas understood games. The neighborhood pressed in and offered itself in useful pieces. Donna Emilia, who ran the fruit shop below their apartment, slipped bruised apples into Leah's hand, and a quiet "for juice" into Isabel's. Across the street, João, a mechanic with hands that told stories of bolts and stubborn engines, shook his head when Isabel asked about buying a cheap scooter. "Don't," he said. "The old ones are thieves of money. Save, walk, or ask me when you truly have no other way." He scribbled his number anyway, then added, "For emergencies." I mean it. They had landed in a web of small kindness. It didn't erase the math. It made the math less cruel. The forced change pressed against Isabel's pride in unexpected places. When the landlord's new letter arrived, noticed that the stairwell lights would now be coin-operated to save costs. She laughed until the sound surprised her. "We live in a machine," she told Thomas, showing him the slot next to the light switch. He dropped in $0.20 and watched the bulb glow with the satisfaction of a scientist. "At least we get to choose when it's bright," he said, and she kissed the top of his head for the sentence. Resistance gave way to acceptance in practical increments. She sold the stroller that had been folded in a corner like a sleeping animal. She learned which bus drivers waited the extra beat for a mother hustling down the sidewalk and which did not. She started waking 15 minutes earlier to write a list for her day. 10 items. Never more. Lists are a bulwark against panic, she told herself, and the word bulwark made her feel like she was building a ship. The first Friday, Isabel burned the lentils. The pot hissed and sulked, the kitchen smelling like a lesson. She scraped the bottom, added water, and saved what she could. Leah ate around the smoky bits with exaggerated care, then declared, "It tastes like the sea rocks when they are hot." Tomas laughed, and suddenly the mistake was a memory they would tease each other about. Remember the ocean soup? That night, when the apartment settled and the neighbor's TV murmured a football match through the wall, she reread the scholarship email. Board meets November 14th. She underlined it twice. If she could keep them steady until then, attendance, fees, the small brightness of both children's eyes when they came home talking about the science corner or a book with a castle in it, then maybe the board would meet and say yes. The yes would not be forever, but it would be a rope thrown across a river. She would run on that rope and not look down. Acceptance was not surrender. It was forward. On the second Sunday, as she measured flour for pancakes, the intercom buzzed. A woman's voice cracked through in staccato. "Isabel Silva, a letter for you from Santana and Alves, advogados. Registered." The word registered nudged her pulse. She wiped her hands, pressed the button, and met the courier at the door. The envelope was heavy, the paper cream thick, her name printed in a font that made her feel briefly like someone in a story. She signed, shut the door, and stood with the thing in her hands. Thomas appeared curious. Leah, too. Pancake whisk held like a wand. "What is it?" Thomas asked. "Something official," she said. Her mouth was suddenly dry. She slit the envelope with a butter knife. Inside was a letter, a date, and a summons that didn't threaten. It invited. A notary office near Rua do Almada requested her presence in October regarding the estate of Duarte Amado, a name she had not spoken since she was 19, her mother's father, a man who had left to Brazil before she was born and sent postcards without returning, a man whose stories lived in the soft corners of family gossip, and in a photograph where he wore a hat and a smile like he was about to sell you a bridge. The letter was not emotional. It was administrative, yet Isabel felt a tide shift under her kitchen tiles. "Who is Duarte?" Thomas asked. "My grandfather," she said, tasting the word like a foreign fruit. "He died a long time ago. I thought there was nothing left." "Is it bad?" Leah whispered, because official envelopes have taught children to whisper. "I don't know," Isabel said honestly, folding the letter as if it might break. "But we will find out." She set the envelope aside and finished the pancakes, but the kitchen felt strange, like a room you return to after someone moves a chair. The map of their narrow world had a new dot on it now. Notary, October, and a question so large she wrote it on the list, and then drew a box around it. After, she told herself. After rent. After the first month's fees. After she finished the morning shift and the evening cleaning and the Sunday batch cooking. After she tucked children into bed and stood at the window to make sure the sea still glowed. After. What would she do if the letter unlocked not a bill, but a door? Weeks took shape. Mondays smelled like coffee grounds and school glue. Tuesdays were for laundry that never quite surrendered the salt air. On Wednesdays, the fruit shop displayed pears with freckles like old maps. On Thursdays, Leah's class practiced music and she came home humming scales with righteous concentration. Fridays had a dangerous elasticity. Tips were better at the cafe, but exhaustion made mistakes more likely. Saturdays, Isabel cleaned the tourist flats with a speed that was not frantic, just practiced. A choreography of sheets and spray bottles and corners. Sundays, holy, were for pancakes, lists, and rest that didn't always happen. She learned to braid time. She learned to stretch food. She learned which neighbors accepted help as a kind of friendship, and which transformed offers into debts. She learned she could ask Mrs. Duarte in 3C to watch Leah for 40 minutes and pay her back by fixing the wobbly leg on her kitchen table. That Hugo, the teenager in 2A, would carry groceries up the stairs for the price of 2 stories about football told by Tomas. That the cafe regular in the gray cap, Senor Vidal, wanted to talk about fishing because he missed it, not because he wanted to flirt. A rhythm emerged, flawed but functional. With it came the tiny victories that feel like new muscles. Leah reading a page aloud without stumbling. Tomas solving a puzzle in math he'd never seen before. Isabel finding an extra $12 in tips in her apron pocket at the end of a long Thursday, and laughing because sometimes the world did offer you change. There were setbacks, the kind that arrived without drama, but with cost. The bus strike that forced a $7.50 Uber, and a late arrival penalty at the flats. The second-hand boots for Thomas that developed a hole exactly on the first rainy day. the fever that rolled through Leah's class and landed gently on her, requiring 2 days home and a negotiation with Anna at the cafe that felt like a test of loyalty. Policy is policy, Anna said, face apologetic, because apology didn't change policy. Isabel swallowed her pride and asked Mrs. Duarte to sit with Leah while she rushed the morning shift. Children are children, she answered, when Anna said the sentence again. And to Anna's credit, Anna nodded. The words did not fix anything. They adjusted the temperature of the room. There were moments of fear that arrived like a phone vibrating in her pocket. Unexpected, insistent. On a Tuesday evening, she stood at the grocery with $40 and a list, only to feel the math slide when she reached the register. She returned the olive oil, the nicer brand, for the cheaper can. She replaced chicken thighs with chickpeas. The cashier had the bored kindness of someone who had seen every form of compromise. Next time, he said, gesturing at the olive oil. It will wait. She nodded, throat tight. In the stairwell at home, Thomas hugged her without asking why, and made a joke about becoming a chickpea chef. Leah drew a picture of their dinner with a crown on the pot. If adaptation is a science, Isabel became a careful experimenter. She charted habits. She tracked sleep. She rearranged the drawer with socks so that school shoes found their matches in the morning instead of making them late. She borrowed a library book about household budgeting written by an accountant who had clearly never worked a closing shift, then adapted its advice anyway. She taught Thomas to make simple rice, and Leah to lay out clothes at night. She put $5 a week into an envelope labeled unexpected. Sometimes she had to take it back out and spend it expectedly. She kept labeling it anyway. Names matter. From the outside, perhaps, this did not look like a story. Inside, the story was the sound of the kettle in the morning and the careful, hopeful way Thomas packed his football cleats. It was Leah's insistence that they keep their plant alive. It's called Esperanza, she said, and Isabel did not argue with that kind of magic. It was Anna's text late one Saturday. Come in at 8 instead of 7 tomorrow. I found someone to cover the open. That felt like a hand on her shoulder. It was the envelope from the notary, pinned to the corkboard above the table where they ate, a date circled in blue. The community settled around them without swallowing them. Mentor might be too grand a word for it, but Mrs. Duarte took the role without discussion. She had a slow, deliberate voice, and a way of rearranging a person's options without rearranging their pride. You are not a problem to solve, she told Isabel when Isabel apologized for asking again. You are a person with a situation. Situations change. People help. A simple theorem, applied when needed, which turned panic into a list. By mid-October, Isabel felt the tightrope bend, but not break. The scholarship board date slept on the horizon like a lighthouse. The notary appointment approached. A second lighthouse, perhaps, or a rock pretending. She rescheduled one cleaning shift, asked Anna for the morning off on the day of the meeting, and laid out her documents. Birth certificate, identity card, a photograph of her mother with the man in the hat just in case. What she told no one, what she barely told herself, was the way the word heiress sometimes tiptoed across her thinking like a joke. It seemed ridiculous, like trying on someone else's winter coat and finding the sleeves too long, the shoulders too wide. Heiresses lived in magazines and problems about taxes. Heiresses had dogs with haircuts. She had children and a jar for bus and bread. She had mornings that began before the sun checked in. Still, the word visited, just to see. On the last Wednesday before the notary, Thomas arrived home with a permission slip for a class trip to the aquarium. Fee, $14. He held it out, hope carefully measured. Isabel swallowed her worry. We'll figure it out, she said. He nodded, as if he believed she always did. That night, she moved $10 from the unexpected envelope, stopped by Dona Amelia's shop to ask about extra apple sorting on Saturday. There was. And ironed the front of her one good blouse for the notary meeting. It felt like a week that could go either way. When the day came, the sky was the pale gray of copy paper. Isabel kissed Leah's forehead and pressed Thomas's permission slip into his hand with the fee counted exactly. Her stomach felt like a drawer slightly open. She kissed both children again at the school gate. I have a meeting, she said, as if all meetings were equal. I'll be back in time for pickup. She told herself this would be like the repairs at the cafe. Something small, fixable, necessary. On the bus to Rua do Almada, she watched the city slide by and imagined a door inside a door. The notary office was bright and too clean, the kind of clean that made her wonder where dust went when it wasn't allowed to live somewhere. A receptionist with a bun like a ballet teacher's took her name and nodded at the clock. "Right on time," she said, as if punctuality were immoral. "Dr. Santana will see you now." The lawyer was younger than Isabel had expected, his suit a precise navy that probably had its own hangar at home. He stood, shook her hand, and smiled with the polite neutrality of a man who had learned not to lead with emotion. "Ms. Silva, thank you for coming," he said. "I know your time is valuable." He gestured to a chair and a folder with her name written neatly on the tab. "We're here regarding the estate of Duarte Amado," he began. "Your maternal grandfather." He said the words as if reading a recipe. "He passed away in São Paulo in 2013. The estate has been in a kind of administrative limbo." He explained Brazil, paperwork, a second family, a lawsuit, the way money can circle around itself for years like a dog deciding where to lie down. "It has now finally resolved," he said, and the word finally landed like a coin in a jar. Isabel listened carefully, holding very still because stillness was her best chance at catching meaning. "You are one of the legal heirs," he continued. "We have been attempting to contact all parties, for various reasons, which I can explain. You were reached last." "I moved," Isabel said, a ridiculous sentence in the face of 10 years. "Many times." He nodded, not unkindly. "We confirmed identity through your mother's documents. She is gone," Isabel said softly. 3 years now." "I'm sorry," he said, and she believed him. "In any case, there is a bequest in your name. It is not negligible." He slid a paper across the desk. "Numbers. They did that thing numbers do when they are too large to fit into the rooms, you know." He spoke again because people need bridges into big numbers. "After taxes and legal fees, your share amounts to $186,400, he said. "But there's more. There is property." "Property," she repeated, as if politically. "A small stone house in Vilar do Pinheiro," he said, glancing at his notes. "Your grandfather purchased it decades ago and never returned. It has been empty. It needs work." He waited. "We can arrange a visit." "And this is real," Isabel said, "because you can't spend a fog." "It is real," he said gently. "But real comes with conditions. There are back taxes. There's a lien for a roof repair that was never completed. The house is not a gift you unwrap. It is a project. We can discuss options. Sell it as is, invest to fix it, retain it. The bank will release funds in stages. I will not pretend this is simple." She thought of the word heiress and almost laughed. A sum she could not imagine. A house that was a sentence, not a photograph. "What do you do when opportunity arrives like a bag of wet cement?" "I have 2 children," she said. "School fees, rent, work schedules. I cannot stop my life to become a construction site." "Understood," Dr. Santana said. "There are companies that handle such projects. There are also grants for rural rehabilitation if you choose to keep it. And there is another detail." He slid a second folder across the desk. Inside was a thin stack of letters, mail in an old hand, careful loops and faded ink. "We found these among the papers," he said. "From your grandfather to your mother. Some were never posted." He wrote like a man trying to cross a river using words. Isabel put a finger on the top letter and felt something that wasn't sorrow or joy, something like permission to feel both later. "I would like to read them," she said. He nodded. "Take your time. There is administrative work to do. Forms, signatures. We can begin the transfer to your account within 10 working days once we complete the verifications." He folded his hands. "I will say this. If school fees are at risk, we can request an interim release. It's not standard, but the bank will sometimes soften when there are children in the narrative." Children in the narrative. It sounded like a genre. She smiled, then surprised both of them by crying. Not the loud kind. The kind where tears appeared like condensation and refused to be reasoned with. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be," he said, pushing a box of tissues across the desk like an offering. He gave her a thick packet to sign in triplicate. She signed with a steadiness she had not expected. The sum did not fit in her mind, but the line where she printed her name did. Real is signatures. Real is fingerprints. Real is the way the pen feels heavier than usual when you hold it above a line that will change a piece of your life. They scheduled a property visit for the following Tuesday. He shook her hand at the door. "We'll make this work in the rhythm of your life," he said. "It doesn't have to run you over." Outside, the city was the same. A bus hissed to a stop. A man argued gently with a pastry he'd already decided to buy. A child wailed the specific outraged cry of a stroller occupant who had been denied something important, like a third biscuit. Isabel walked to the school with the folder pressed to her chest, and the strange, floating feeling of someone who has received news and will not understand it until she makes dinner. At pickup, Leah flew at her with a drawing of a fish labeled, "Sir Waves a Lot." Tomas had a new bruise on his shin, and a grin that meant he had scored. On the way home, she told them only, "The meeting went well." She didn't say number or house. She said, "We have options," because that was true, and didn't require an immediate explanation. That night, after dishes, she read one of the letters. It was from 1989. Her grandfather wrote about work in a way that suggested he had loved it and pretended it was only duty. He wrote about her mother with reverence wrapped badly in practical advice. He wrote one sentence that sat up and looked directly at her across time. "If I have failed you in presence, I hope I have not failed you in provision." It sounded like a man stepping back from a door he had never quite found the courage to open. She slept with the folder on the chair beside the bed and woke twice to make sure it was still there. By morning, the word heiress had put on a different coat, not fur, work denim, boots, a pencil in the pocket. It stood in her kitchen and asked not, "What will you buy?" but what will you build? If movies wrote the next part, money would arrive like rain in August. In Isabel's life, it came like a cautious clerk, knocking, waiting for the right paper, returning later. The bank requested additional verification of identity due to cross-border inheritance. The tax office required a certificate from the parish council. She took 2 buses and a number ticket that blinked A112 to A183 in an hour. Dr. Santana warned her that the roof lien would pause the property transfer unless she allowed an assessment. "It's procedural," he said. The way doctors say, small incision. Procedural still took time. Time was the one thing her budget didn't sell. Meanwhile, bills did not pause for narrative. The second month's tuition drafted from her account. Rent pinged and left. Leah's classroom announced a costume day. She sewed a fishtail from an old blue shirt because she refused to spend on sequins that would shed like regret. Tomas's football coach hinted at a small tournament fee. Isabel nodded and did the math in her head the way a person checks the time, even though they already know they're late. Her ex wrote from a number that changed every few months. "I'll send something soon," he texted. "Work is complicated." She did not reply. And then, because she is a kind person who refuses to rehearse outrage for sport, she wrote back, "The children are well. School is good. If you can send, send. If not, say so." He sent $100 the next week with a note. "I'm trying." She took the money. She took the sentence. She put both in separate folders in her mind. At the cafe, Anna's kindness became a rope and a boundary. "You can swap shifts with Marta on Tuesday to visit the property," she said, "but don't do this every week. We need you steady in the mornings." The tone was not a threat. It was a simple statement of balancing needs. Isabel accepted the tension like weather. Tuesday, she met Dr. Santana and a contractor named Rui at the stone house in Vilar do Pinheiro. The place crouched behind a crooked gate, vines threading themselves into the cracked mortar like uninvited guests who had decided to stay. Inside, it smelled of old damp and old wood, 2 scents that can be coaxed into sweetness with work. The roof sagged like a tired shoulder. The hearth was black with history. In the back, a fig tree reached for light it had been denied. "It has bones," Rui said, which is what contractors say when they fall in love with a project. "The roof is the monster. The rest?" He shrugged. "Sweat, patience, money." "How much money?" Isabel asked, because romance does not pay for beams. "For safety and basic habitability, $28,000, $35,000, he said without ceremony. "More if you want it pretty. Less if you can live with plain and do some work yourself. We'd need a dumpster. Permits. It's not quick." She imagined the house matte and quiet, a place where her children might read on a winter afternoon while it rained. She imagined herself there, bone-tired and proud, a pot on the stove and the kind of peace that isn't performative. Then she measured those images against the weight of tuition and rent and bus passes now. "Could we?" she began, then stopped. She was about to ask if they could just sell it ugly. The word felt like betrayal. Of what? She didn't know. Maybe of the letters. Maybe of the part of her that believed in fixing things when fixing was possible. "You can sell as is," Dr. Santana said gently, reading her face. "It will fetch less, but even less is something." He did not say, You are not less if you take less. She supplied that herself. The next day at the school, Leah's teacher asked to speak briefly. Leah, it seemed, had become an enthusiastic defender of a friend who was shy and loaned pencils with ferocity. She is a little lion, the teacher smiled. We only need to remind her that lions can be gentle. Isabel nodded, proud and impressed by the problem. She couldn't help thinking, if only all the complications were like this, a matter of calibrating bravery. On Friday, the bank emailed to say the initial release would be $3,000 while they completed transfers. Relief sat down in her kitchen like an honored guest. She paid the next month's tuition a week early. She bought the good olive oil and felt it like a blessing when it glugged. She replaced Thomas's boots with ones that did not leak and almost cried in the store because dry socks are not luxury, they are civilization. Then, a small earthquake. The landlord announced he planned to sell the building within the year, which meant a storm of uncertainty for everyone. I will give proper notice, he said, as if civility softened chaos. Maybe the new owner will keep the tenants, he added. The word may be doing no work at all. Isabel smiled, thanked him, climbed the stairs, and sat on the top step with her head in her hands for exactly 1 minute. Then she stood, cooked dinner, and resolved to keep her information clean and her options unromantic. Complications braided themselves. A bank that needed one more stamp. A contractor who could start in January, not November. A supervisor who needed morning coverage, exactly on the day the tax office would see her. A boy who grew 6 centimeters in a season and needed shirts that covered his wrists. Each problem was small enough alone. Together, they formed a chord that hummed in her bones. Isabel learned a new skill. She said yes to help before she was drowning. She asked Mrs. Duarte to take Leah on the tax office day. She traded the favor by cleaning Mrs. Duarte's fridge and leaving behind a pan of baked rice. She told Anna about the notary and the house in a handful of sentences with no apology attached. Anna looked at her a long moment and said, If you need to change your schedule for a month when the work starts, we will try. But tell me early, and be clear. Clarity, another currency. One evening, sitting with the letter spread on the table and the children asleep, Isabel read a passage that changed the tilt of her thinking again. Her grandfather had written in 1992, Our family has a habit of hiding what we hope to give. We think secrecy is protection. All it has given me is silence. It landed like a truth she'd been walking around. She didn't want that habit. She wanted her children to know their lives in full. So she told them the next day. Numbers scaled to their ages. Details softened but not erased. There is money coming, she said. Enough to make school safe for a while. Enough to fix a small house if we choose. It will not make everything easy. It will make many things possible. Tomas asked questions like a banker. Leah asked if the house had a cat. Not yet, Isabel said. They laughed. The knot in her chest loosened a little, then held, because holding is what knots do. She slept deeply that night and dreamed of a roof that did not leak. With decision comes the need for a choir. No soloist can raise a roof. Isabel made a list of people she trusted to ask for guidance. Short, humble, precise. Anna at the cafe for scheduling and income predictability. Dr. Santana for legal maps and bank choreography. Rui for the house's bones. Mrs. Duarte for wisdom that didn't come with a bill. Juan the mechanic for the reality check of a man who hated bad machines and would tell you if one was hiding. And, unexpectedly, Professor Mendez, the cooperative school's counselor, who had been watching her children's adjustment like a gardener watches new plantings. She booked 15 minutes with Mendez between classes. He had a tidy office that smelled faintly of dry erase markers and peppermint tea. I wanted to be transparent, she said, holding the folder like a flag. She explained the inheritance without drama. She explained the house and the work. She explained the way money solves some problems and casts light on others. I am afraid of building a future on excitement instead of math, she confessed. I don't want to be reckless in a new direction. Mendez nodded, pleased as if she had handed him a good question to grade. 2 things, he said. First, make sure the present is fed. Tuition, rent, basics. Your children need stability now more than the promise of a cottage in spring. Second, do not underestimate what a project you own could do to your family's story. He tilted his head. Would you consider involving the school? Not for money, for learning. We have a community day once a month. If you take on the house, we could organize a small crew for painting, planting. Children love to see adults repair something. It teaches a different math. Isabel sat back, startled by the simplicity. "I never thought of asking like that," she said. "Ask," he said. "People like purpose. Give them screws to turn." She took his words to Anna next. "If I shift to 2 evening cleaning shifts for the next 2 months, I can be on site on Fridays when deliveries come," she proposed. "I will keep all my morning cafe hours. I will not ask for weekends off except the community day once a month." Anna looked at the schedule, her pencil tapping like a metronome of business. "We can do that," she said. "But if I call, you pick up. Emergencies don't read calendars." "Agreed," Isabel said. She felt relief and responsibility arrive as a pair. She asked Rui to price the project like a woman who knew the value of €1. "Roof, safe wiring, 1 functioning bathroom, and a kitchen that doesn't trap smoke," she said. "Beauty can wait. Give me numbers that don't lie." Rui nodded, sent a quote the next day that said $31,200 with notes, and a timeline that imagined 8 weeks if permits behaved. He offered a small discount if she could pay $6,000 up front to secure materials before prices climbed again. "Materials move like fish," he warned. "You have to catch them." Isabel texted João a photo of the house's electrical box. He sent back 4 words: "Do the wiring right." She laughed and wrote them in her notebook as if they were sacred. She sat with Mrs. Duarte for tea and told her everything. The older woman listened the way rain listens to a roof, testing for leaks. When Isabel finished, breathless with details, Mrs. Duarte said, "You wish to make a nest that doesn't blow away. Good." She squeezed Isabel's hand. "Let the children help, give them a corner to own, and keep a little cash under the metaphorical mattress. Banks are banks. Mattresses are mattresses." With counsel collected, Isabel drew a plan that did not lean on hope. Phase 1. Secure tuition through the year. Reserve $15,000 as an unsexy safety net. Rent, food, surprises, no matter how the house called to her. Phase 2. Pay $6,000 to lock materials. Begin roof and wiring mid-January when the contractor could commit. Start small herself in December. Clearing, cleaning, taking photographs for a workday notice. Phase 3. If the building sale forced her out, the stone house would not yet be ready. So, maintain a second plan. Short-term rentals in city. Ask Anna for extra cafe hours to cover any overlap. Miserable, but survivable. Plans B and C had places to live if Plan A sprained its ankle. At school pickup, she told Mendez she would take him up on the community day. "We'll bring gloves," he said, delighted. "We'll bring a thermos of tea. We'll bring the knowledge of 12-year-olds who think they've invented work." Tomas, overhearing, glowed with the pride of being the kind of boy who could lift a plank with his friends and be trusted not to drop it. Isabel posted a simple note on the building's corkboard. "Stonehouse Workday, Vilar do Pinheiro, Saturday Deck 6. Paint, prune, sweep. Bring old clothes and good stories. Lunch provided." She did not add emojis. She did not plead. She trusted people's appetite for useful afternoons. Then she did the unromantic thing. She asked the bank for clarity in writing and watched for tricks. She moved the first $3,000 into a separate account labeled school and rent. She waited until the 180 sows $400 arrived in pieces, as promised, over 2 weeks, and did not touch it until the tax office stamped a final page with the thock that felt like yes. She paid the tuition for November and December. She bought smart, but not smug, a second-hand winter coat for herself that did not pretend to be new, but would keep her warm. Paint rollers, masks, trash bags, vinegar for scrubbing. She declined the instinct to buy a sofa for the new place, because the new place did not yet deserve a sofa. At night, when fear climbed the stairs, she met it with lists. When doubt knocked, she reminded herself that accepting help is not failure. It is strategy. When pride flickered, she fed it small, honest victories. A page turned, a meal cooked from a plan, a conversation had without apologizing for existing. She had become the kind of woman she needed when she was 20, and slowly, the choir formed. Neighbors who could give 2 hours, a teacher who would bring paint, a contractor who promised to start when he said, a lawyer who returned emails at human speed, a family that understood that their story was theirs to draft. No saviors, no miracles, just many hands and a roof, inching toward shelter. The day everything tightened was a Tuesday in late November, the kind of day that begins with a sky the color of old paper and ends with an ache in your lower back that argues for hot water and silence. The scholarship board meeting was scheduled for 16:15, Isabel's shift ended at 2. The plan was to grab a sandwich, read the letter one more time, and be at the school early. She had prepared numbers, narratives, a clear accounting of the past months, the children's attendance, Thomas's improved grades, Leah's gentle lion heart. She had learned to speak without apology and without demand, just facts threaded with care. 40 minutes before she was to leave the cafe, the espresso machine wheezed, choked, and died. A hiss, a shudder, then the terrible quiet of a machine that has decided it will not. Anna stared at it like a betrayed lover. "No," she said. "Not today." A queue was forming, long and fidgety. The repairman could come by 15:30. "I'll call him. You man the drip," she said, already dialing. "And," she hesitated, reading Isabel's face, the clock behind it. "Go when you must. I'll cover." Isabel brewed drip coffee like a drummer, efficient, unflashy, relentless. Coins clinked, steam rose. People sighed and accepted disappointment at the proper temperature. At 14:03, she tore off her apron. "I have to go," she said. "Go," Anna said. Relief and tension braided into the word. "Text me when you're done." Isabel half ran to the bus. It slipped away from the curb while she panted 10 meters behind it. The next would arrive in 9 minutes. Her phone said the meeting was in 72 minutes. She calculated: bus, 12, walk, 5, buffer, 10. Enough, barely. She stood at the stop and breathed. A message buzzed from Dr. Santana. "Bank confirmation. Full amount cleared. Good news. Call when free." She smiled without showing teeth, as if a loud grin would steal time. A second message arrived from the landlord. "New owner will visit building next week. Please be available." The day had tried to be 8 days at once. The bus arrived, coughed its passengers, took her in. A woman with a shopping bag pressed into Isabel's side and apologized without making room. A man argued softly with no one. A teenager watched something funny without earbuds and laughed alone. The city was itself, imperfect and crowded and inexhaustible. Her phone buzzed again. "Mrs. Duarte. Leah says her tummy hurts. Very pale. I took her to my flat to rest. She's lying down. We are near if needed." The words skittered through her like a sudden wind. She checked the time. 15:07. She thought of turning the bus around. She thought of the scholarship board, a room scheduled and stacked with practical people who had made time for her. She texted back with hands that wanted to shake. "Thank you. Please keep her resting. I will call as soon as I arrive at school." "Tomas?" "With me," came the reply. A balm. Isabel pressed her forehead to the window, the glass a cool certainty. 49 minutes now until the meeting. Decision time. She called Mendez, the counselor. He answered on the second ring. "I'm on my way," she said, voice carefully even. "But Leah is unwell. She is safe with a neighbor. May I bring her to the nurse, then come to the meeting? Or would you prefer to reschedule?" Mendez paused the exact right amount. "Bring her to the nurse. We'll start 5 minutes late. We understand life," he said. "You are not a test." She breathed. "Thank you." She arrived at the school at 16:02, hair damp from the hurry. She kissed Leah's warm forehead in Mrs. Duarte's calm living room, thanked her with eyes and words, and carried her downstairs, light but not light enough to forget. The nurse, an efficient angel in a cardigan, settled Leah on a cot with a cool compress. "Probably a small bug," she murmured. "It's going around. She can rest here." Isabel washed her hands, smoothed her blouse, and walked into a small room where 3 people waited with files. Mendez, the headmistress, and a board member with kind glasses. She placed her folder on the table and stood until they asked her to sit. 49 minutes earlier, her plan had been precise. Now it needed to be different without becoming a plea. "Thank you for your patience," she began. "I know you value punctuality. I do too. My daughter is unwell. She is nearby and safe. I am here because I believe deeply in what this school gives my children and what we give back. A family that shows up, that pays as we are able, that participates." They nodded. She did not let herself look at the clock. She spoke the numbers like stones across a river. Attendance percentages, grades, fees paid, the interim inheritance funds that guaranteed 2 more months without drama. She did not say $180,400. She said, "We can commit to stability now while planning for long term." She did not say property. She said project. She did not say need. She said partnership. The headmistress asked 2 questions. If tuition were reduced, how would that change your work schedule? And What supports do you have if something unexpected happens? Isabel answered without flinching. Reduced tuition would allow me to decline the evening shifts this winter when the house project begins. I would be home more nights, which would benefit the children. Unexpected events. I have a cash reserve built, and a support web. I didn't before. I do now. It changes how I sleep, Mendez added, soft but deliberate. We have observed both children's adjustment. We support this family's continued presence here. The board member with kind glasses nodded, made a note. Isabel did not try to look at the note. She allowed quiet to sit in the room like a fourth chair. The headmistress smiled in the way of a person who is careful with good news. We can offer a 50% scholarship effective December through June, reviewed in June with likely renewal, she said. It comes with expectations of continued engagement. 1 parent committee per term. Attendance steady. Communication clear. If this helps, we are glad. Isabel exhaled the breath she had been holding since September. It helps, she said. It helps more than I can say in this room without embarrassing myself. They laughed, and the room's temperature reset to human. She signed a form. They shook hands. She did not cry. She took the paper to the nurse's office, where Leah was awake and wanted crackers. She held her daughter's hand for a moment and let herself feel the exact shape of relief, not a flood, a warm blanket, a roof tile nailed down, a hinge quieted. When they left the school, the sky had darkened into drizzle. They walked home under one umbrella, Leah tucked close. The bus was late. For once, she didn't care. 49 minutes had rearranged something fundamental. The machine was still broken at the cafe. The landlord still planned to sell. The house still needed a roof. And yet, she could see the beam she had set today, straight and solid, joining 2 walls that had been yearning toward each other. That night, Anna texted, "Machine lives. Repairman came. Tomorrow is normal." Normal sounded like a gift. December arrived with the wet cheerfulness of a coastline that knew rain, like some people know their mother's laugh. On the 6th, the community day happened as if it had been waiting all along. They took the early bus, backpacks full of sandwiches, thermos of soup, a roll of trash bags that felt like optimism. At the gate of the stone house, a small crowd gathered. 3 of Thomas's classmates with mud-friendly shoes, 2 parents who knew how to wield a roller, Mendez in an old sweater with a paint stain that said he had done this before. Rui arrived with a generator that coughed and then agreed to be helpful. Mrs. Duarte came with a tin of rice pudding and the authority to make teenagers wash their hands. They opened windows that had been shut a decade, the air moving through the rooms like a dog let out after a long car ride. They filled bags with broken plaster and beer cans left by bored ghosts. They found a postcard behind a shelf. Leah claimed it as treasure and put it in her pocket like a map. Tomas and his friends hauled branches in the yard, their laughter turning labor into a sport. Isabel wiped the black from the hearth and discovered old tiles that made her gasp. A pattern like waves, blue and white, chipped but insistent. "We'll keep these," she said, pressing her palm to their cool surface as if they could hear. At noon, they sat on the steps and ate soup from cups and sandwiches that tasted richer for being earned. Someone told a story about a grandmother who had kept tulip bulbs in a drawer and planted them after the war. Someone brought up a neighbor's father who had fallen from a roof and survived because his wallet was so thick. "Money saved his life," the storyteller said, and they groaned, then laughed. Mendez asked Thomas what corner he wanted to claim for a reading nook. Thomas pointed at an alcove where light fell like a promise. Leah declared the fig tree hers. "I will talk to it," she said solemnly, and no one doubted it would answer. Isabel watched the house change under their hands. Not finished, not even clean, but awake. Work generates belonging. Belonging makes work lighter. She had not known that at 20. She knew it now. By late afternoon, they stacked tools, labeled paint cans, and made a list for next time. Rui committed to a January start for the roof. Scaffold, tarpaulin, beams ordered. He shook Isabel's hand. "You're doing it right," he said. "Slow and true. Pretty can wait." On the bus home, Leah slept against Isabel's shoulder, smelling like soap and leaves. Thomas scrolled through photos he had taken, before and afters, friends grinning with broom handles like musketeers. "We should make a blog," he said, half joking. "Or a bulletin board at school. People like to see progress." "Maybe," Isabel said. "People also like to make it." She felt something settle in her that felt like both end and beginning. The following week, The bank transfer arrived in full. The account numbers looked less like strangers. Isabel moved $15,000 to the safety net, scheduled the $6,000 to Rui, paid rent without her stomach tightening, and set up the scholarship's new tuition level. She bought paintbrushes that did not shed, and 2 lamps from a thrift shop, because light is both function and mood. She did not buy a sofa. She did not book a holiday. She did not confuse a blessing with a permission slip to forget who she was. At the cafe, she kept showing up, early, steady, full of small jokes. She trained a new girl, Inez, who looked at Isabel like competence was magic and asked, "How do you do it?" Isabel wiped the counter and answered, "Lists, friends. Saying no when yes would break me." The girl nodded as if this were medicine. The landlord's new owner visit came and went. A young couple with a baby who looked around the building like they were measuring the shape of their future. They smiled, asked polite questions, left. Whatever happens, Isabel told herself that night, we have options. She meant it now, not as a dare to fate, but as an acknowledgement of design. She was building a life with redundancy. One beam could crack, and the roof would hold. On the last day of the term, the school held a small assembly. Leah's class sang a winter song in rounds, voices out of tune but perfectly right. Thomas received a certificate for most improved in maths. He didn't care about the paper, but he grinned at her in a way that made her sit down because pride is a physical thing. After, Mendez pulled her aside and said, "You look like a conductor at the workday." She laughed. "I felt like a person who finally had enough hands." "Keep them," he said. "Hands like that are hard to find." They went home through air that tasted of rain and roasted chestnuts from a cart that sent smoke into the cold like a story being told to the street. Isabel bought a small cone as a celebration. They ate them hot, burning their fingers the good way. That night, she pulled out the last of her grandfather's letters. The final one was a half-page draft with crossings out like a man trying to edit himself into courage. "If one day you read this," it said, "know that I meant to return not only with money, but with a place. If I failed, forgive me by making a place of your own." She pressed the paper flat and whispered into the quiet apartment, "I'm doing it." It was not a movie. It was better. It was a plan that held. January opened with scaffolding and the sound of hammers under a gray sky, music of a future built with fingers and patience. Rui's crew moved like a small weather system, arriving, lifting, measuring, pausing for rain, laughing at a joke Isabel never fully caught. The roof came off in strips like old wallpaper. New beams went up straight. The tarpaulin blew as a bruise until tiles arrived. Isabel stood back and took photos and sent one to Mendez with the subject line, "Progress." He sent back a thumbs up and a suggestion for a student art day in spring. Paint the garden wall with fish and figs. At home, the scholarship changed the tone of evenings. Isabel dropped the extra cleaning shift one night a week. She ate dinner sitting down more often. They read. They learned to make flatbread in a skillet. They practiced 5-minute tidy as a team and turned chores into a competition that Leah somehow always won by being less dramatic about it. Thomas started helping a younger classmate with homework, returning with the satisfied exhaustion of a boy discovering that explaining is a kind of knowing. The landlord's sale moved in bureaucratic inches, uncertain, but no eviction notice. Meanwhile, the stone house gained a spine and then a skin. Wiring, done right. The hearth cleaned and tiled. The bathroom humble, functional, clean. The kitchen promised to become a kitchen, not a corner where food apologized for existing. Isabel updated her will. She named Mrs. Duarte as temporary guardian if needed. She set aside $8,000 for the children in an account only they would touch when they were older, with an "if I hope never" letter. Practicality is a love language, too. She took a Saturday to teach Thomas how to navigate the bus on his own in case she were late, to show him where the keys hidden safely in the building were not, in fact, hidden. She taught Leah how to call Anna if both neighbors were out. These were not grim lessons. They were acknowledgments that life is weather, and you should know where the coats are. Spring hinted itself into February with a day of sudden sun. On that improbable Saturday, the fig tree at the stone house looked less offended. Leah tied a ribbon to one of its branches, as if to anchor it to their story. They painted the wall white together and declared it a canvas. "We will add the sea later," Tomas said, and a window looking at a different window. Isabel took a picture of their 3 shadows on the bright wall and saved it in a folder labeled Home. The money did not make them careless. It made them steady. Rent was paid until the building's fate decided itself. Tuition was a conversation. not a cliff. Groceries were bought with a list and the luxury of brand choice once in a while. She allowed small celebrations, a decent pair of headphones for Thomas, a music class trial for Leah. She started a night class in accounting basics at the community center on Thursdays because she refused to be the woman who handed strangers her future without knowing how to read the columns. The first assignment made her feel slow and then alive. "You're good at this," the instructor said. "You think in numbers and soup." She understood exactly what he meant. By April, the roof was done. They threw a small picnic on the new floor. Bread, cheese, oranges, sitting cross-legged and happy. They could not move in yet. There was more to do. But the house had crossed a line from ruin to shelter. Isabel placed one of her grandfather's letters in a drawer by the hearth like an anchor. Not to worship a man she did not know, but to honor the part of him that had tried in the only way he knew. She decided the house would not be a monument to regret. It would be a machine for ordinary joy. In the city, the building finally sold to the young couple with the baby. They met the tenants in the stairwell, tired and hopeful. "We will renovate slowly," they said. "We hope you'll stay." Rents would adjust. Timelines would lengthen. It wasn't a threat. It was a plan spoken out loud. Isabel considered and said, "We are building a place of our own. We will likely move by autumn." The young woman looked relieved. "Tell us if the stairs break before then," she said, and they all laughed at the stairwell's eternal creak. On the last day of the school year, the headmistress handed Isabel a renewal letter. The scholarship would continue into the next year with the same terms. "Thank you for your clarity," she said, "and for the photos of the house. I showed them in assembly. The children are now all obsessed with the concept of a roof." "Excellent," Isabel said. "Everyone should be." They moved into the stone house in late September, after a month of weekends that felt like the good kind of tired. The first night, they laid mattresses on the floor and listened to the new roof accept the rain with a sound like permission. The air smelled of lime wash and soup. They did not have a sofa yet, but they had lamps and a table in the habit of sitting close. Leah fell asleep with her hand on the fig tree's ribbon, which she had brought inside for the night, just in case. Tomas took a picture of the hearth and sent it to Mendez with the caption, "We made it." Isabel stood in the doorway and understood heiress at last. It did not mean a person with a trust fund and a dog with a haircut. It meant a woman who had inherited both a problem and a possibility and chosen to become the hinge between them. It meant leaving the door better hung than she'd found it. She thought of the sentence that had once felt like a splinter. "We've had wear and tear," and smiled. Yes, they had, and they had learned how to mend. In the morning, she would make pancakes. They would eat them with the good olive oil and a little honey. Then they would carry boxes from the city, precisely labeled with a pride she refused to pretend away. She would go to the cafe at dawn and pour coffee for people who believed their stories were the most urgent in the room. She would clean sheets on Saturdays until she decided she didn't need the extra money. Then she would stop. She would attend her accounting class and pass the exam. She would help another mother write her first budget and not feel like a savior, just a hand. There would be new problems. There always are. Pipes that complain. A child who learns heartbreak and needs to be fed at midnight. A tax office that misplaces a document and needs to be coaxed into remembering. But now they would meet those problems in a house where the roof had been set right by a choir of hands. And when the first winter gust blew, the windows would rattle just enough to remind them that safety is not silence. It is work, together. Isabel closed the door gently. The latch fit. The key turned without drama. The house exhaled. So did she.